We're now recording. And actually, I might as well go ahead and all right, put on some captions for folks. Okay. So as I was just saying, land use is super important. Thank you, Sarah, for reminding me to click record. So for folks who are just now tuning in with this recording, we're just about to start talking about what the legislation is that House Our Neighbors is bringing to Olympia this legislative session. So our legislation is called the Municipal Housing Cooperation Law. Basically, there's already legislation that exists at a state level in Washington, and it's called the Housing Cooperation Law. And what it does is, if you look on the screen, you'll see the Housing Cooperation Law grants exemptions from restrictive land use codes to like HUD housing. So the Seattle Housing Authority, the King County Housing Authority, and these other public housing agencies that already exist throughout Washington and are HUD affiliated. There's already a law on the books called the Housing Cooperation Law, which basically allows these housing entities to enter into agreements with local governments to waive their zoning regulations for a number of issues. The idea is that this allows for potentially a public housing development to be built taller, or maybe it doesn't have to follow the same parking requirements, or it doesn't have to go through the same design review process. All of this can happen for public housing without cities having to actually go through the process of changing their zoning laws. So they can just exempt it for if the Seattle housing developer wanted to build a new house. They don't do that very often because they don't get the funding to do it. But if they wanted to build a new place, a new building, they would want to build probably a big building. They don't really do single family homes. Much of the city would be unavailable to them. But right now, they could go to the city of Seattle and say, hey, we would love exemptions from all these codes so that we can build housing right here. And the city, if they wanted to, they have to go through a process, could allow that to happen. They could waive all sorts of zoning regulations. And this is basically what we want for the social housing developer, not only in Seattle, but for any municipal housing developer, any public development authority that is created throughout the state of Washington, that provides permanently affordable social housing to the residents of that municipality. So as you can see, it's modeled off this existing housing cooperation law. And yeah, it would basically, if passed, allow the social housing developer to save a bunch of money on each project. It would open up much more of the city of Seattle to social housing than is currently allowed in a restrictive land use. And yeah, it's a no-cost option. So it costs the state nothing to implement this. It's just changing some rules. That could really have a huge benefit for our social housing developers' ability to stand up projects and get things going. Yeah, that's the long and the short of it. It's pretty simple. It's like 2.5 pieces of paper, pretty straightforward legislation, but that is kind of a lot. I want to pause and see if anyone has any questions on what exactly this law would do before I move forward. PDA. So Lil asks PDA. PDA is a public development authority. So a PDA, that's what the social housing developer in Seattle is. There's a bunch of different. There's also a PDA that like owns and runs Pike Place Market. It's just some publicly run development authority that owns and maintains property. Alan asks, does that waiver stay with the land if buildings change ownership or we build all together? That's a really good question. I wouldn't imagine I the waiver would like kind of continue to exist. Uh, It'd be hard to undo a waiver after you've built a building. Like if you do build the building and let's say it changes ownership, it's going to be hard to like undo some of that like restrictions because it would be about how tall the building is or how many parking units there were. But I actually don't know the answer to that. It's a good question. Zach asks, is most of Seattle off limits because of the use classification of social housing or because of neighborhood residential zoning? It's because of neighborhood residential zoning, broadly speaking. It's not like social housing isn't allowed here, but other kinds of housing are allowed here. It's just that the vast majority of Seattle, you cannot build the kinds of building that the social housing developer is interested in building to provide large amounts of housing to Seattle at an affordable price. Really good question. Yeah. Any other questions here?
I have a question, sort of,
Yeah.
kind of going off the last one. So I'm an architect and I design affordable housing, as you know, Jeff. But so I'm very familiar with these land use codes, and it seems to me like maybe the biggest benefit of this would just be being able to build in single family zone.
Yeah.
Like that would be the biggest restriction that we're overcoming, from my understanding.
Yeah, that's certainly going to be one of the biggest ones. Minimum parking requirements that we did just have some changes in the comp plan that kind of work to support
Hmm.
that. Um, but yeah, basically, like this is kind of a way for those who don't know, the House Our Neighbors has been up to a lot of advocacy work for the comprehensive plan, which is every 10 years the city of Seattle comes together and looks at its comprehensive plan, and basically what it does is kind of looks at how is it going to rezone everything to accommodate for growth. And we've been advocating really strongly to upzone more areas, allow for multifamily housing in more of the city, more residential areas. And we've had a lot of wins, but there's still a lot of restrictions. And passing this state legislation would allow us to kind of leapfrog some of that advocacy work, which would be really great. Margaret asks, is there a draft of the proposed law? There is. Yeah, I haven't been cleared to share out the exact language just yet. But it's pretty straightforward. I'll say if you were to Google RCW 35.83, this one right here, and you found the language for the housing cooperation law, it's not exactly the same, but it's very close to that law. I imagine that Han will very soon be giving this language to everyone that possibly wants it. I just haven't been approved to give it out just yet. Right. Seems like we might be slowing down on questions. I'm gonna go ahead and just put everyone here should have my email. I've sent you probably several emails. But if another burning question comes up, please feel free to shoot me an email. I just put it in the chat. Um, Elizabeth asks if the RCW already exists with similar language. Yeah, so the goal basically, the language that exists right now only applies to those HUD managed like federal public housing affiliated developers like the Seattle Housing Authority, whereas the social housing developer, a PDA, does not fall under those same jurisdictions. So we would not be able to, I say we, the social housing developer would not be able to apply for this. The Seattle Housing Authority would be able to, but we're trying to basically get the same exemptions that they have for social housing developers. No, you're totally fine. Thanks for asking. I'm sure other people were wondering the same thing. Yeah. The entire legislative what? Oh, wow. Um, perfect timing. Um, Not to get all conspiratorial, but maybe somebody knew this was happening. We see real estate lobby. No, I kid. Okay, it's 6:20, so I'm gonna go ahead and bump us on along. Oh, Karina asked me a really good question. Does everyone know what the RCW is? God, actually, what does RCW stand for? It's basically our
Revised
Revised Code of Washington.
wow,
Revised
thank you
Code
all
of
so much.
Washington. We're all smart here. Some of us were raised by attorneys.
Right on. Yeah. So it's basically our laws. So yeah, RCW, every RCW is like one of Washington's laws. Um, Sweet. Okay, yeah. Interrupt if we're getting too wonky, really trying to boil this down to an intro level. But we are talking about land use and super fun stuff, so it gets a little wonky. So please feel free to interrupt or put something in the chat like that. Okay, so I'm going to move us on from talking about the law itself to talking about the legislative session. So very exciting. Some of you here are going to be intimately familiar with how this process works. And some folks, it sounds like, are going to be very new to this. My millennials in the crowd, you might remember the whole like, I'm just a bill. Yeah, I'm only a bill. This is basically it, only for Washington State. So we're learning Schoolhouse Rock for Washington State. And so I just want to kind of briefly go over this the legislative process that we are going to be oh, thank you, Shirley. That we're going to be engaging in. Um, so, for folks who don't know, this coming legislative session is what's called a short session. So, the Washington State Legislature works on a 2-year cycle, so a biennium. So, last session was our long session. It was the first session where we set the budget. They do a lot of spending, and it's 105 days or something like that. Whereas this session is the short session. It's only 60 days long. They're not passing nearly as many like big budget items. It's really about like revising the budget from last session and getting around to some legislation that maybe we didn't get to last time or some new legislation that's come through. But since it's so short, there's a lot of competing bills, and we've got to work quickly and intentionally if we want to get this passed. So with that said, do you all see my little cursor, my little blue dot here? Perfect. Okay. So, but I'm just going to give folks a second to like look at the screen and I will shut up for a second to just kind of take it in. This is the process. These are the committees that we go through in order to pass something. So I'm going to let y'all read for a second and then I'll kind of go over it. Yes. Thank you, Karina. Shout out. I totally just snagged this from Statewide Poverty Action Network's page, so I didn't have to create my own new graphic. We love them. But yeah, so this is basically the overview now that folks have had a few seconds to look. Our bill is going to be introduced in the first chamber, so either in the House or in the Senate. It is going to land first in a policy committee after it's introduced. So for us, that is going to be the Housing Committee. If it has a fiscal impact, so if it costs money, it goes to the Fiscal Committee. Ours, fortunately, does not, so we get to jump that one. And then it goes to the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee is known as the place where bills go to die. So the Rules Committee is like basically where, from my understanding, and I have a cursory understanding of this, so people who do this as their job or have done this way longer, interrupt me if I kind of get it wrong. Fortunately, you don't have to be an expert to do this advocacy work, as I will be showing all of you. But the Rules Committee is where they decide basically what gets put on different agendas. They look and make sure, things get through, proper procedures. And it's kind of where prioritization of what is going to be taken up during the session happens. Because in the session, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of legislation will be introduced. I think like last session, 800 bills were introduced in the House and like 700 in the Senate or something like that. And less than 20% of them will pass. So we're looking at pretty grim odds because the system, as it says on the Washington State Legislature's like website, is set up to kill most bills. So this is what we're up against, and the Rules Committee is a big part of that happening. This is where most bills actually end up. And fun fact, how's our neighbors? We actually did introduce very similar legislation to what we have written for our municipal housing cooperation law. We actually introduced it last session. Rather than, and this is getting a little wonky, so pause me or ask questions in the chat if you need clarification. Rather than introducing standalone legislation like we're going to do this session, we just introduced an amendment to the existing housing cooperation law to basically add social housing into it. So if you look at the legislation, it was literally like us strike through, add, include municipal housing, include social housing. And last session, that actually was voted out of the Housing Committee with an 8-to-1 vote, including getting support from 2 Republicans. So from all Democrats and 2 Republicans, only 1 Republican voted against it. So it got through the House Housing Committee. And it is currently sitting in the Rules Committee. Because this is still technically the same legislative session, the same 2-year biennium session. It's still sitting there within the Rules Committee of the House side. Maddie, you asked the question, how is it decided where something is introduced? Genuinely, I actually don't know the answer. My understanding is kind of like who is championing it. But maybe I can, yeah, call on, I can phone a friend. Sarah might know the answer.
Yeah, so every bill will have what's called a prime sponsor. And so it's whoever is the original, whether it's a state senator or a state representative, that determines if it's going to be in the Senate or the House. And just tidbit fact, there are a lot of bills that are called companion bills. So they will release essentially the exact twin bills in the House and Senate, and they still go through the same process. And so, yeah, and it just depends on if a senator or a representative is the prime sponsor.
Whoa, shout out to Karina for making the graphic we're all looking at. Wow, I love that. Also, shout out to Sarah. Thank you so much for explaining that. That is very helpful to know. Um, but yeah, so basically looking at our bill, it's right here in the Rules Committee of the House. And we have a little bit of a strategy. I'm going to get to our strategy a little bit more in the presentation on what we're going to do with it there, what we're going to do on the Senate side, what we're going to do with our new legislation. But I'll get to that in a minute. So we're following our little bill along. Let's say our bill gets out of the Rules Committee. It's going to go to a floor vote. So a floor vote just means like a vote of the entire House that it's in. So either the House of Representatives or the Senate. If it passes there, then it goes to the other chamber. So either the House or the Senate, depending on where it was initially passed. And it's going to go through the same process. So it's going to go through the Senate Housing Committee. It's going to go through the Fiscal Committee if it needs it, the Rules Committee, and then back to a floor vote in the Senate as well. And all of this is procedural, and all of it takes time, and all of it needs to be scheduled a little ways in advance. But it's a whole process. So once things get going, stuff is really like moving at a clip because you really got to keep up. You'll see the next slide I have is a timeline, and it shows like all the deadlines that you've got to really keep up with to make this happen. But when House Our Neighbors gets this legislation with the support of you all through both chambers this session, it'll go on over to the Governor Ferguson's desk, and he will be able to sign it. And he'll be like, "Oh my God, what amazing fiscally responsible legislation! I love that I don't need to tax my rich friends in order to pass it." And so he'll sign it, and it'll become a law. Yay! Yeah, so that's basically a legislative session overview. I'm going to pause there before I move on to the timeline for any more questions. Classic Bob, I know, right? Or do any of the super smart policy wonks in here want to chime in with anything that they think is helpful info at this point?
We'll just say though, it actually repeats one more time. So after it goes through both chambers and it passes through, it actually has to go back to the original chamber for them to say like, yes, because as we've seen a lot of times bills get watered down, they get amendments. And so we have a bill, everybody gets, a water bottle. And then by the end of it, it's like, no, we all get little Dixie cups. And the original sponsor's like, no, we said water bottles. And then they actually have to kind of like agree to what the end result is from the opposite chamber. Because that has happened so many times that bills just get completely, it's like the telephone game. By the end of it, it completely gets distorted. So there is one final checks and balance in the original chamber. And that's where a lot die.
And that process is called like conferment. Is that right? Something like that? Doesn't matter. Reconciliation.
Yes, reconciliation. Yes.
Reconciliation.
Reconciliation. Perfect. Yeah, so that's our process. I will follow up with it. Is there a limit to how many times bills can go through this system? Like within one session or like overall? I don't think so. I think things can, I mean, Sarah's actually here in a minute is going to share about some work that they've done that took years and years and years. So I think that things can be tried and tried again many, many times. Oh, fun fact that Sarah just taught me that I was going to share with you all. Fun way to know what bill belongs to which place. I just learned this on a call with Sarah like last week. If a bill is introduced in the House, it'll either start with a one or a two, or if a bill is introduced in the Senate, it'll start with a five or a six. And the one or the two relates to which year of the biennium it was introduced. So if a bill was introduced in the House last year, like House Our Neighbors bill was, it starts with a one because it's the first year of the biennium. So ours is 1687. So House Bill 1687. Wow, look at all these reacting faces. See, all of you smart policy people, I didn't know this stuff either. So yeah, House Bill 1687 was what House Our Neighbors bill was last year. And that it still is in the session because it's a 2-year session. It's still just sitting there in the Rules Committee. So if that is brought out of committee for a House vote, for a floor vote, which is what we're hoping will happen, it'll still be called House Bill 1687. However, our other bill, if we introduce it, it'll start with a two because it's being introduced in the second year of the biennium. Conversely, if we introduce something in the Senate this year, it would start with a six. If we had introduced something in the Senate last year, it would start with a five. So if you ever see a bill number and it starts with one of those numbers, now you know you don't have to ask what chamber it's from because the numbers tell you. And shout out to Sarah for giving me that fun little fact. All right, I'm going to move us on along to the legislative session 101 timeline. We're in a short session, as I mentioned. Once it gets going fast. I was doing a lot of advocacy work last session in the long session for education funding. And it still went by really fast. You know, deadlines like come up on you very quickly. It is a really fun fact. So with 60 days, I'm like, wow, it's going to be breakneck speed. So here's just a general overview. Once again, I'm going to pause. There's a lot of words on the screen and let folks just kind of read it. And then I'll get into what the details are. All right. Yeah, so these are like basically there's a lot of deadlines, but these are kind of the high level ones. So as you can see, session is going to Chris asked, is there a difference in what kind of bills can be introduced in short and long sessions? The answer is no. Any bill can be introduced in either session. But I'll say that bills are much more viable in one session or the other. So if you're trying to pass a bill that is like really complicated and really expensive, and you bring that to the short session, it's going to be much less viable than it would be if you introduced it in the long session, where typically those big budget items like the overall budget is set for 2 years, that's going to be more likely to pass there. But there's no law prohibiting any bill from being entertained at any time. Though you might hear, it's funny that you ask, because there's a lot of people talking about how we need to do something about the deficit and we need to do something about the cuts to federal spending that are happening this session because we didn't pass all the progressive revenue last session that we could have. And so people are talking about introducing progressive revenue. And there's folks who are already saying, "Oh, you can't do that in a short session." You can. It's not normal practice, but you can introduce any bill at any time. So you could introduce a new revenue stream. You could introduce a bill that costs $5 billion at any different point in time. I hope that answers your question. Um, whoa. This time, if we know. Sorry if you already covered this. Margaret asked a good question. Alan asked a good question. Is March 12th Sindai this session? I believe so. I saw both the 12th and the 13th put out there. I saw the 12th more than I saw the 13th. I'm pretty sure, based on confirming with some legislative aides, that it's going to start on the 12th and it's going to end on the 12th as well. That's our 60-day session. And then for Margaret, who are our bill champions this time. So we have a primary sponsor already lined up for our bill, which is really great. Representative Julia Reed was our prime sponsor last session for the amendment, and has also agreed to be our prime sponsor this session for our new legislation. So we're very, very grateful to Julia Reed for already joining on and being a primary sponsor for this. And we have some other legislators who are already interested in supporting as well. And we're in some conversations, but obviously the state is much bigger than Seattle, which is where everyone knows about social housing. And so we have a lot of work to do to get more people on board. So I'll share a little bit more about some of that moving forward. But great question, Margaret. Okay, so just kind of going over some key dates that we see here on this timeline. So we start on the 12th, we end on the 12th, 60 days total. One that I would love for everyone to put in their calendars right away if you want to come hang. HON is actually going to be most likely, we still need to like for sure sort this out, but we're hoping to join Washington Can for their big lobbying day, which happens on January 19th, as long as that all gets all squared away. But either day, January 19th, that is MLK Day. It is a big lobbying day. A lot of orgs will have folks out. Legislators are prepared. They have open calendars on those days for meeting with constituents. So we will be down in Olympia. We would love to get you connected with your legislator and set up a meeting so that you can go and talk with them directly about this legislation and urge them to pass it. Yes, Karina's like, lobbying days are so fun. I've gone down with my union like 4 times. There's a bunch of a bustle on the Capitol. Everyone's running around to different legislators. People are taking pictures. People are doing chants. Yeah, so I really we would love to see as many of you there for it as possible, and we're very excited to hopefully partner with Washington Can for making that lobbying happen. I'm talking so much about Washington Can. I feel like I haven't given you a proper introduction, Sarah. But next slide, you'll get to know all about Sarah and how amazing she is. Elizabeth, my union is Seattle Education Association. So we go down with the Washington Education Association. Yeah, I was a teacher in Seattle Public Schools for 7 years until Han poached me. Great question. Great question. Where's Reeves at? Okay, so I'm getting distracted by the chat. I'm gonna move us along. Okay, so these are the key dates. Mostly I want you to take out of this is how quickly those key dates come up, how little time there really is between each of them, and how fast we need to be moving. And I spoke with Senator Alvarado's legislative assistant earlier today, and they really wanted me to stress that on top of each of these deadlines. Oh, and by the way, I have these little asterisks next to January 31st and March 1st because the calendar actually hasn't been set yet. Like the deadlines all get set at the beginning of session. So these are just dates from the last short session, and it's going to be somewhere around these dates, but it might not be exactly January 31st. It might be like February 3rd. But this is like the broad strokes of what the session looks like. But yeah, so yeah. Alvarado's legislative aide really wanted me to stress that there's an invisible deadline a week before all of these dates because the procedural minutia bureaucracy kind of takes so long that you really have to have stuff introduced. You have to have stuff on calendars. You have to have hearings set in order to take votes on these different things. So if you wanted to have a bill, you need to not only have it like read and voted on by like the 31st, you need to have it turned in, ready to go with all of your sponsors and everything a week before that. So things move pretty quick. Yeah, any questions here before I move us on along from Legislative Session 101 to what we're doing? All right, I'm going to move us along. Okay, here we're going to start talking about what it looks like to win. And for that, I am very excited to have Sarah here from Washington Can just to share a story about some legislative victories that they've had. Washington Can, as many of you probably know, an amazing, amazing grassroots advocacy group that has done a ton of work to support House Our Neighbors. And Sarah is a very rad human who has been involved in a lot of that work. And I'm very excited that she was able to tune in from Florida to talk with us tonight. So shout out, thank you so much, and I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, hello everybody. Just want to introduce myself. So I know some of you, but actually, to be honest, most of you I don't. My name is Sarah Leone. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a community organizer for Washington Can. Anybody who is unfamiliar with the work we do, we have four major campaigns: housing, healthcare, ending our addiction to mass incarceration, and democracy reform. And so I will just be going over one big win that we had just this last session, and that was House Bill 1131, which actually has to do with incarceration. So not necessarily housing, but there is a lot of intersectionality because we are, criminalizing people, or housing insecure, and a lot of people who do come out of prison, uh, they they're unable to get any rent, places to rent to them, and then it just continues this perpetual, that's a whole other conversation. But so House Bill 1131 was introduced almost a decade ago. It went through a lot of different names, a lot of different numbers. It was actually written by a gentleman in prison about 20 years ago. And so that's how long it took. And so just kind of giving the stark reality that we're in it for the long haul. And so what House Bill 1131 did was it expanded the Clemency and Pardons Board, and won't get too much into detail. I could talk about this forever, but we don't have the time. Many people don't know this, but Washington State, we abandoned the parole system. We have absolutely no parole in our state since the early 80s. And so the only mechanism for a second chance look is called a clemency or a pardon, which maybe you have heard of. And so this expanded it from 5 members of the board to 10, in theory, to be able to see more people because they only do these hearings 4 times a year. So on average, like one person or two gets released, and if that. And so just the tidbit facts, yeah, it can take years to pass, literally years. So don't get discouraged if you've been working so hard on something, just grinding, and it takes 2 years and you just want to give up. Like, don't throw in the towel because we finally got it this last session. And also, the title of the bill really matters. So, the bill this year was just concerning clemency and pardons. That's it. So, last year, it was called, or excuse me, last session, it was concerning the release of incarcerated individuals from total confinement prior to the expiration of a sentence. And then we massaged it to just concerning conditional commutation by the Clemency and Pardons Board. And I say that because there are sometimes trigger words that you just read a title and they automatically just don't want to support something. If you hear early release, they're not going to think about it. And that's probably why House Our Neighbors chose municipal housing cooperation law, not let's build social housing, because when I did a lot of advocacy for the social housing developer and the funding, people are like, I'm not a socialist. There's just so many trigger words. So words have meaning. And so they have to be really thoughtful of how a bill is framed. And then also get creative with stakeholder engagement. It's not just about sending emails and setting appointments or meetings. What we did was we did a video. We did a very short video and sent it to legislators because many people can't relate to what it's like to be in prison, but they might be able to relate what it's like to love somebody or to have a family member move away or not be able to see them. We interviewed wives, children, fathers, mothers who had a loved one who'd been locked up for a quarter century, and this bill could bring them home. So it kind of brought a little humanistic, feel to it. And then also that segues into how to frame your narrative to be digestible. And I don't want to make this like a partisan thing, but let's just call it the opposition or just those who have yet to be, supportive of our ideas. What we finally started doing was spinning this bill of not necessarily emphasizing the release of incarcerated individuals, but this could be a cost savings to the state. At Clawlin Bay Correction Center up at the peninsula, it costs $120,000 to incarcerate one person a year. That's a lot of money. Even if we release 3 people, I mean, we framed it in a budget way. And so that was actually made it more digestible for a little bit more fiscally conservative people. And then also don't accept the scarcity mindset. I'm sure we've kind of all, been subject to this. Oh, you want 3 things, only pick one. And all these nonprofits have to like fight with each other because only one can win. No, it can be a yes and. And so we were able to not accept that because there's a lot of, bills that have to do with incarceration, just like there's going to be a lot of bills that have to do with housing. Like we can be collaborative. And so, when you think about advocating for the municipal housing cooperation law, kind of frame it in the way because some legislators might not even know what it's like to be a renter anymore or a landlord, but they know what it's like to follow the law and they know what it's like to, lose or maybe have unstable housing or like have unstable, you care for your loved one who might, be facing homelessness or anything like that. And so maybe put like more of a humanistic spin to this when you advocate because everybody has a story. And I'll end on, it's a cliche saying, but people don't remember what you said, but they remember how you made them feel. Like bring as much of your own personal story to it and make it not just about housing, but about like safe communities. And because whether you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, what have you, people want to be safe and they want to feel like secure in their own home. They might not want social housing, but social housing is a component of that. So again, I can keep going on, but I'm not because in light of time, but just wanted to give some of our examples as a coalition partner of we did get a win. So this might seem like a really big uphill battle, but every now and then you get those beautiful peaks that we get shit done.
Yeah, I'm so happy that passed. Thank you so much, Sarah. Shout out for Sarah. I see all these virtual hands clapping for you. Um, yeah, really, really excited to be in this work with folks who have been doing the work for so long. So very grateful you're here, and very grateful Han is not doing this alone, and in fact doing it with all of you, which is really what tonight is all about, getting y'all plugged in. Um, so I'm going to move us on along and talk a bit more about like kind of building off of everything that Sarah said, like our path to victory for this. So here's just a quick breakdown of our analysis of like where we sit, what advantages we have going into this session, and what challenges we have going into this session with our legislation. As Sarah said, one of the biggest advantages of us is that we can talk to fiscally conservative people and say this doesn't cost any money. So this is a no-cost option for the state to make it easier to address our housing shortage and address the affordable housing crisis that we live in by simply changing a law that voila, it's going to be easier to build housing. Um, like I said, it passed through the committee last session, and not only did it pass through the Housing Committee in the House, it passed with kind of a bipartisan vote. So it was able to earn the support of Republicans when it was in committee, which is really important. Chelsea asks, is no cost the same as no fiscal note? I actually don't know. Any wonks here know if those are the same thing? I'm gonna guess yes, but I don't know for sure. Elizabeth asks, sorry to miss this. Does a bill that passed through a committee or a chamber have to restart next session? No. So it's in standing rules right now. It's in the rules committee, sorry, not standing rules. So it can be just taken out and very quickly put to a floor vote, which is an exciting thing. So the fact that we did a little bit of work to get this in kind of got us a foot in the door, which makes our possibilities of success a lot higher. Yeah, that's one of the big advantages that we have. Granted, we might be bringing in this new legislation. It really kind of depends on what we hear from some key sponsors and supporters. Um, yeah, Karina, if folks are familiar with Robert's rules, first of all, I'm so sorry. And second of all, it is like old business from a previous meeting. Um, but yeah, so this is one of our big wins. We are talking with like Senator Alvarado, who's the co-chair of the Senate Housing Committee, to be like, hey, what do you feel about these two versions? And we'll get some sort of insider feels on some key votes. But largely for the purposes of everybody in this room, our task is kind of the same, whatever route we go with this old bill that we've had or this new bill, which is going to be that we need to build out very large grassroots support. But fortunately, this is something HON already has in Seattle. We just need to take that to other places. and also ensure that our large grassroots support in Seattle translates into all of our Seattle reps, not only supporting this by voting for it, but being advocates for it in their committees. Shannon, I see your hand.
Is there a way to participate virtually and still get my voice out in Olympia?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We'll totally get into that. You can comment virtually in support of legislation. There's going to be a lot of emailing opportunities. A lot of these meetings that we'll be setting up with legislators will be virtual. We will not be going down, we won't even be going to their local offices to meet with them. Most of their calls are on Zooms. So I would say the majority of it can be done virtually. And then
Woohoo.
some of it's asynchronous too. You can like send emails and like sign in support of a bill during session and stuff like that. I'm going to quickly go over our challenges, and then we'll kind of move to our next set. So our challenges, as I've said, short session. Boy, there's going to be a lot of competition. Most of the bills that are heard will not pass. Um, uh, the other challenge is that social housing is currently going to be seen as a Seattle thing, and there is a stigma against Seattle and much of the rest of the state. Not that that can't be overcome. There's a lot of things that come out of Seattle that end up becoming state law. So, but that is just one thing that we'll have to overcome. This is a bill that at present is going to largely just affect Seattle. And so it just might not be something that's a huge interest for lawmakers outside of Seattle. So it's going to be hard to get people on board with something that they won't see directly supporting their constituents. Of course, from our perspective, this is like, oh, you pass this, and then voila, you should go ahead and create your own municipal housing developer because you would then benefit from this amazing land use exemptions. The last challenge that I'll say is that there is some concern about this amendment and how that interacts with the public housing authorities, the law that exists already, the housing cooperation law. So we're kind of like, that's like a little insider conversation. How is that going to end up working out? So that's kind of where we're at with our advantages and our challenges. And the main takeaway I want from all of you for this is we win by getting lots and lots of people engaged, by engaging our legislators early. That's why we're meeting right now. October, the session doesn't start for 3 months. Yes, Margaret, we'll have tons of materials, though we still need to build some of that stuff. So this is really us like just now getting going with our state advocacy work. So House Our Neighbors will be developing all sorts of materials. We have talking points, but I love Sarah's idea of a video. I love figuring out all the different creative ways that we can get this messaging out there. And I'd love to partner with all of you to figure out how to make that happen. Chelsea says, we did host HON's Social Housing Roadshow on the East Side this year. Yes, Chelsea, I was very excited to see you sign up. I would love to talk with you about getting support on the East Side. I'm definitely hoping that we can chat. Yay, would love to help with creating those fact sheets and materials. Amazing. I will definitely reach out. The ways that you all see interest in getting plugged in, I'm so glad that people are jumping into that because one of the next things that I have for us is wow, oh my God, a form for all of you to fill out. How exciting. Alan would love to text bank. I'm going to grab this link really quick and put it here in the chat. So one of the most important things for tonight, if you are feeling excited, if there's a way that you're interested in plugging in, if you want to talk with your legislator, if you want to reach out to some legislators outside of your district, if you want to build out some grassroots support down in Olympia, in Tacoma, and other places, I want to get you plugged in on that work. I want to give you everything that you need to start making that happen. And the best way that I'm going to be able to follow up with you and do that is if you fill out this form. So we're actually just going to take a minute, let everybody fill that out really quick, while I also talk about some of these other most important notes. You heard me say it a million times. The important notes are that this is really good legislation and you all should support it. The legislative session is short, and there will be high competition for attention. And we will only succeed if we build lots of grassroots pressure and partner with other advocacy orgs like Washington Can, with the State Labor Council, with FutureWise, with MLK Labor Council, with East Side for All. Shout out to all the amazing orgs that are present in this room. That is how we win. We build a big coalition that with lots of people all saying that this is a really good idea. And then I'm looking at the time, 6:56. I did have these little fun breakout groups planned for all of us to get together and talk about some stuff. But I fear I've prattled on a little bit too long. But I'm glad we were able to have all this conversation in the chat and get some back and forth going. I think we're going to go ahead and skip these. But I'll just talk about what we were going to do really quick. Because there's basically two groups that we were going to break out into. And fortunately, all of you can just let me know if you're interested in the work of either of these groups when you fill out that form. And you're welcome to email me afterwards as well. But basically, the groups were, do you want to get involved right away in advocating in your legislative district? So advocating to your direct legislators. This is really good for folks who are not in Seattle, really good for folks who are like in the 34th legislative district, maybe in like the 11th or the 32nd, where we just don't have quite as many people and we're not as plugged in. You want to learn how to do that. So maybe you want to set up meetings with your legislators, or one thing that we were going to talk about was passing a resolution in your LD's local Democratic Party in support of this bill. And I'm happy to talk with anybody about that afterwards. If that's your shtick, if you really want to get plugged in with advocating in your legislative district, please fill out in the form and indicate there's a question that says, yes, I want to do that. And you can comment and say, I'm really super interested. Please reach out to me. That's what that's for. The other one was going to be basically outreach beyond Seattle. And this is really important because we can't just be in Seattle. This is statewide advocacy work. And also some folks, some of our legislative districts are a bit kind of further ahead in this process. Some are like the 43rd LD, the 37th LD, both have resolutions in their Democratic parties ready to be voted on. We've reached out to all of our representatives because folks like Sean Scott are like super on board with this and follow us in everything that we do, which is amazing. We love Sean for that. So those folks, I was gonna bring us all together and be like, hey, who do we know? So like East Side for All, so glad that y'all are here. You're gonna be such an important group for us to work with in figuring out how do we get East Side legislators on board. We were gonna look at some other key senators in the Housing Committee who are in like Tacoma and Olympia and up in Shoreline. And be like, hey, who knows people in these areas? What are your personal networks? Who can you reach out to who might have the ear of some of these folks? So is it like the local teachers union? Do you know somebody who works for a grocery store in Shoreline who might be affiliated with a union there that has the ear of a legislator on a policy issue? So that's something I want everyone to kind of leave thinking about. And I'm going to send a follow-up email to this to everybody so that we can really think about how can everybody here plug into this work and become strong social housing advocates at the state level this coming legislative session. I'm sorry we didn't get to breakout rooms. I know they're everyone's favorite thing to do at 7 p.m. On a weeknight with a bunch of strangers on Zoom. But you'll just have to come to the next one and it'll be only breakout rooms. So with us passing over that, I'm just gonna skip to a very heartfelt thank you all so much. I know no one's actually mad about no breakout rooms. I was gonna make everyone do it. This is me being a teacher, being like, you've got to talk to each other. Yay, Shirley, I'm so glad you found it very helpful. Yes, huge shout out to Sarah. And shout out to everybody for coming through and sharing so much wisdom. Karina, thank you for making that amazing graphic. I didn't even know that. That's so wonderful. I'm glad we have such thoughtful, smart, passionate advocates in our orbit here at HON. I look forward to working with you all. The last thing I want to ask is if folks feel comfortable, I'd love to get a quick little screenshot of everybody on this call. So if you could turn your cameras on if you wanna. We'd love to just post a quick pic to social media to show how many people we have engaged. And then I will let you all go and have your evenings. Da, 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 da. Wait a few awkward seconds. Oh no, cameras are going off. Oh wait, I look terrible. All right, 3, 2, 1. Da, and we got it. All right, amazing. That's all I have for you all. Thank you so much.